All right, so welcome everyone. We are recording this session for review purposes and whatever. So it's being recorded. I am Chris. I'm one of the facilitators, and then there's Vivian up there. Say hi, Vivian. There
Hi.
we go. So we are doing this virtual classroom escape room, sort of virtual, kind of based around Google Drive applications, but ways to kind of create more engaging things. So what we'll do is we'll do a little bit of housekeeping up front, talk a little bit about what everyone has done this past year, sort of what worked, what didn't, show off some stuff that Vivian did a ton with this in class, and then sort of send you on your way with a little task for next week. And next week's class will be the same, the 6:30 to 8:30 time. So in terms of some quick housekeeping, all the stuff for this course, any resources, links, all the reviews are going to be here on this blog. It's the Heathcote Tech blog. There's across this orange menu bar, there's an STI drop down. And then this is technically a Google course because it's all Google related. And then you'll actually see, you can go over down here, virtual classrooms 2021, click on it. It has the dates, our agenda, which we'll take a look at in a second, resources, which we'll go through as well, general Google Chrome resources, which we'll talk about, and then we'll have the session recordings there once they're finished. In terms of the agenda, it's kind of a loose agenda. We're gonna kind of cover just some basic things, make sure everyone's kind of on the same page in terms of some basic Chrome features and sort of Chrome uses, with making sure everything is separate. And then we're going to kind of go through and talk about the different projects that we're going to create. You guys are going to create a folder today, which will be kind of where all of your work products go. And then eventually there will be a participant project sheet Google Doc, where what you'll do is you'll put in your folder. And essentially it'll be like your name, a link to your folder, and kind of a description of what's in that folder. As we go through this, you may have things that you kind of work on casually and kind of dabble with, and that's in there, and that's fine. There may be other things that you kind of deep dive on where there's fewer things but more in depth. And that's kind of the notes. The notes will just sort of be like an explanation of what's in there. And it doesn't have to necessarily be full and complete pieces of things, because this is about you guys exploring different techniques, different ways of doing things. So you may have a whole bunch of half done things, and that's fine, because hopefully what that's doing is it's giving you a sense of what's possible. So we'll go through that.
Yeah.
And
So hopefully, I'm sorry, Chris. I
no, go
was
ahead.
just thinking you know, I always find the most valuable classes are the classes that you take something away with you, right? So this in essence can be like a virtual make and take, right? Like after hopefully sharing some ideas and seeing what other people have been doing, either you'll get ideas for your own like kind of original version of stuff, or like you'll um, see something that somebody else did and say, gee, I want to do that too. And that's all right. Because you're going to make and use whatever is useful for you, or take and adapt so that you can make it useful for you.
Cool.
Um, yeah, so I just wanted to say that because I think think of it less as like making work or product for the class itself, and making work and product for you and for your classroom and for your own use. And whatever that turns out to be is good, appropriate.
Completely. And that's why you may kind of create a whole bunch of different little things in that folder that get halfway done or whatever. And you're like, yeah, I'm not really going to use that in my class. So fine. You keep it in the folder as sort of part of that evolution of experience. We're like, all right, I tried these things and I know they won't work for me. But then there's this one file that's in there that I really like kind of vibed with and connected with. And that's why that file is done more. Because it's fine to have a bunch of incomplete things, as you, like Vivian said, are discovering whether or not it will work for you in your classroom for your content area, your age group, whatever it may be. Some other quick just housekeeping in terms of using Google, and I always like to add these little kind of snippets in at the start of any Google course that we do, I do, and I think it's valuable for anyone who uses Google, like Scarsdale and Edgemont, to understand a couple of key points about Google Chrome. The biggest key point is that everyone has multiple Google accounts. We know this, but you want to be able to keep your school stuff separate from your home stuff. And you want to make sure you're not commingling these things. And the way that's done is, it used to be called the people feature, but now it's called the profiles feature. So what I'll do is I'll share my desktop real quick so you can actually see the whole bit. And you'll notice that up here, there's this profiles button. What that does is it shows you a whole bunch of different Google accounts. So I have right now, right now I'm here on this head right here, which is my Scarsdale account. I can open up my daughter's, and when that opens up, you'll see it's a completely different window. And this is very important because it keeps everything separate. It keeps the two accounts completely separated, because you may be working on your home computer with your work stuff over the summer, but you have your personal stuff. You obviously want to make sure you keep that stuff separate. So using the profiles, or formerly people feature, is super important, because oftentimes what people will do is they'll come in here, go to a Google just generic window, they'll come to this head right here and they'll add another account. But what that's going to do is that's going to open up another Google account inside of essentially the window that is the main one. The main one is this little tiny head up here, and this, it controls a lot. And as you're doing these things, what this profile does, or this person does, is it controls things like your bookmarks and things like extensions. So if you came down here and added another account and it was like your personal Gmail account, you're not going to have your personal bookmarks or extensions. You're still going to have your work ones, and you can run into conflicts with which drive you're in, or because each tab will operate independently and not on the same account. So that's why what you want to do is you want to use that people, that profile. They just changed the name to profiles like a month ago from people. And what you want to do with that is up here, you don't add the account here. You come up to this head up here, and when you click on it, it gives you all these different profiles. You can go down to the bottom and add. And what that'll do is that'll create this second profile, so your two windows are totally separate. So like I have my daughter's here as the example. So you can see like different bookmarks, obviously different color scheme, different customizations. And by doing this, it ensures that if I had to look at my daughter's stuff, I would be seeing it as her, not as me, or not as me sort of commingling with her. So using the profile feature is super important. Related to that, one of the reasons why I have this set up, especially my kids go to Scarsdale schools, so it's really helpful, because sometimes I want to test things and I want to see if the things I create can be seen by my students, or can't be if I want to have the settings, the security settings set in such a way that I don't want anyone to see it. Now, at the elementary level, we as elementary teachers have access to like our students' usernames and passwords, so that makes it easy. High school, middle school doesn't. But one way you can check to see if something is at least visible on the internet publicly or not is by using an incognito window. Now you'll notice I can't use an incognito window right now, and that's because I have my daughter's account open, her profile open, and we don't allow students in Scarsdale to do incognito. And that's another good reason for using profiles if you're using personal and home, is like you want to make sure you're operating within your school sort of dynamic. So if I just click back over here, I can now do an incognito window. What's nice about this is it still gets tracked and things are still blocked. It doesn't mean that you can search for whatever you want to search for and nobody's going to know. You're still going to know. It just means you're not logged in to an account. So it's just a way to check to see if something is visible publicly or not. Just kind of a quick way to see if, well, do I want this to be visible publicly? Yes or no. Just a good way to kind of see how the outside world would see it, not logged in as you. So those are two just big things about Google housekeeping, which is incognito lets you see something not being logged into anything. And it's just a way to kind of have this like anonymous sandbox. You're still going to get blocked. The firewalls and stuff are still going to block you from restricted site and restricted content, just a way to be not logged in as you. And the minute you close it, everything you did in that session goes away. Now, again, on the back end, we know what you looked at because the server logs are there. We know what the machine went to. So it's not that you can get around the filters. It's just a way for you to check things not being logged in as yourself. And then the profiles, just a way for you to be able to log in as, let's say, a personal and a professional one on your home computer without actually having a conflict of those two different accounts. Cool. So that's just a little bit of quick Google housekeeping. Any questions on incognito or the profiles before we move into actual content? Everyone good? Cool. All right. Now, Vivian, would you want to start and sort of show what you've done this year and then along these lines, and then we'll kind of let people kind of share and jump in and out talking about
Sure.
What they've done.
Yeah, so I just want to start by giving a little background to the course. I think knowing this will kind of help you understand where a lot of the work came from, and then maybe can also help you plan what it is that you hope to get from the work. Chris is the computer teacher in our building at Heathcote School. We've worked together a lot, but it wasn't until obviously COVID changed our lives dramatically that I found just how sparse my understanding of technology was, and how there were so many things I needed to do and wanted to do that I didn't know how to do. And so I found myself every day either calling Chris or texting Chris, or I'd be like, hey, how do I do this? I need your help. Or, I tried to do this and I really screwed it up. Par for the course, I think, for a lot of people at that time. But I was scrambling to figure out how to do all this and to teach and to do it virtually. And that's kind of how I really got started trying to do all of these things. And so I said to Chris, help me make a virtual classroom for students. Help my team build a site for kids to access information, homework stuff, like all of that. And then once I got started with that, and I knew that I had to reach kids virtually, I looked for ways to make activities, lessons more engaging and help them want to be on the computer, when a lot of them it was hard to kind of keep kids motivated through Zoom. So that's kind of where this came from. And once we got through, from March to June, I said to Chris, I bet there are a lot of people who would want to kind of see what we did and learn some of the things we learned. Certainly I learned the hard way. Hopefully it'll be a little easier, in this session. But then the reason we offered this class again was that now I used these materials all year. And I, from September to June in this hybrid model of teaching. And then finally, when we got to be all in, and, it changed. It allowed me to change some of the things I did and add to and learn from. So I will start, I'm just going to go to my drive. And the first thing I think I want to pull up and show people is the 5th grade site, Chris. Just so that, and I'll put it in present mode, so that people can kind of get a sense of what it was that we did. All right, so it's loading right now. Let me share screen. Okay. So here we go. So Chris helped our 5th grade put together this site. And I know he did it with many grades at Heathcote School, but this became a landing spot for kids who in 5th grade, where they could access, the entire grade could access the same information, so that while we were teaching virtually, it wasn't it wasn't where one class was doing one thing and another class was doing another. I mean, although we did, some of us do our own thing, it helped bring some cohesion to the work we were doing, and we were asked to do that by the district. But having this landing site kind of allowed us to put out information that affected all kids, or at least all 5th grade students. So I had my own space on this page, and what I was able to drop in here, which is loading, was this virtual classroom. So this is what I asked Chris to help me build. This virtual classroom lives on the 5th grade site, or at least kids can access it, I should say, from the 5th grade site. But on this page, all of the information pertains to my classroom and the things we did in my class, right? So the first thing I asked kids to do every day was to log on to the class meeting. Sometimes it would have links right on the whiteboard here to things we were doing that day. And it was a great way for me to give instructions to students. They knew to log on first thing as soon as they walked in. And so I could have instructions right up here without them, needing to ask me, or, they could get started independently. And a lot of the things, a lot of the pictures here are linked, right? So if we were reading Fly Away Home, they could click on, oh, maybe that link was not correct. Oops, wrong link, sorry. Nope. I may have changed the links, but they could click on things and it would take them. So the kids should see this is a great website. The kids could click on that link and it would take them to that site. So this was, like I said, just a great informational kind of landing spot for kids. If the kids clicked on this little dog here in the corner, this is my little dog, Wiley, it would take them back kind of to that main menu. So they could go to the class meeting, they could go to resources, they could click on these links, right? If they needed to see what the specials were for today, they could click on the special schedule and it would take them to that document with that information, or a login code, or the Heathcote Library, the database. So it helped kids, let me stop share for a second. It helped kids during our hybrid learning time be independent, not have to email me, Mrs. Robert, I can't find this, I need this, I don't know where this is. It helped them be independent and helped them be accountable, so that when we were learning, like half in school in the morning and away in the afternoon and then switching, it got a little hairy for kids, especially the babies, right? Like they're 5th graders, they're still young. And so granted, what I thought was really great was in March, when the kids were in all in, right, from 9 to 3, they were still using these resources. So like they kind of trained themselves to have that level of accountability and independence that you kind of really want them to have. So there was like that bonus. At first it was a necessity, and then it really kind of became a bonus.
And part of
So
the look
yeah.
too, just in extending that was like, we wanted to have a space that reminded them of the physical classroom, like when they weren't in the physical classroom. And that's why we went with this, was because it gave them that sense of, there's the rug, there's the flow of the day, there's some of those
Yeah.
sort of same regular normal things that they were missing because it was hybrid. So kind of to try to create and not have it be like it's just going to be in person, or it's just going to be a list of assignments, like a way to kind of say, all right, like you're not in the building, but here's sort of a digital view of the building or digital view of your classroom to kind of help ease sort of that transition during that hybrid
Yeah.
thing. And that was a big impetus behind it, was just to make it not only easily and accessible, but kind of help the kids feel less separate and less isolated when they weren't physically in the room.
Yeah, it engaged them. And I think the other thing that parents ended up liking, was that they could access it also. And it gave, it added this layer of transparency to what we were doing. Like I don't, at least in our experience, for some of us, parents were so stressed and feeling kind of like they couldn't really put their finger on what was going on when we were experiencing this hybrid learning, that having this site and letting them see what the kids were seeing, what the assignments were, how things were going, really helped parents feel more comfortable with what was going on. And it also allowed them, you know, and understandably, as a parent myself, like when you're not sure what's happening with your child and their learning, like you want to be kind of on top of things and front and center, and you're asking questions and you're trying to figure out. And having this ready and available to parents kind of allowed them to take a breath, kind of, release a little bit of that stress and say, okay, I see what my child is doing. I see how they're doing it. I can let go a little bit, and I can take a step back and kind of allow them to participate in this with a little more, again, independence. Like, and that in fifth grade is such a huge word. And I'm imagining in your classroom, no matter what grade you teach, that those two words, independence and accountability, it's really what we are trying to instill in kids and give them the tools to access, right? So it just became like this super helpful, purposeful tool, like I said, that started out as a necessity, but then became like this bonus. And I used it when we were virtual, when we weren't virtual, when we were full time. I would still have kids access the virtual classroom. And I'll go back just quickly to show you, like, here I have, this was the link to the library. So whenever we were doing research, right, kids, they knew, oh, I need to get to the library site. I can just access it here. And, Chris showed me how to kind of have this little return button, right? Make the little dog, the return button to this screen. But then I could put up I could add or link here on this page any other slide because this is basically a slideshow that I wanted that had information for them, right? So I had a math board where I had math lessons that I had done in class. Kids could access the lesson, right, with additional information that I added to, right, like answer keys and so on. Because when I couldn't be there for kids all day long, they needed somewhere they could go for additional information. So they might have seen the lesson in class, but if they wanted to go back and review it again on their own, they could. So I liked having that page in my classroom. That might not be something that works for everybody else. We had our own class library. I made a Padlet that I added to that class library where kids could find information on Just Right books, right? So if they were interested in a graphic novel series or a favorite author or leveled books, uh, levels P and Q, RST, and so on, right? And then recommendations, like kids were allowed to recommend a book themselves and add the, they wrote about, they recommended the book, got the blurb, and would add to the Padlet. So again, it's just it was another way of engaging students and giving them a resource, right? By accessing this, by having this Padlet, because in our classrooms during COVID, they couldn't go to our classroom library, they could see what books we had here and just like read little blurbs and so on. So this is a work in progress. There's, I'm certainly not done with it, but it was something that I used in the classroom at the time. We used, this, if we come back here to this page, I had a math enrichment board where kids could find these different math enrichment activities, click on it, and they could do activities. So in any case, right, you certainly can make your virtual classroom be anything that you wanted it to be. Like, these were the things that were important to me, that I felt like kids needed access to in my classroom.
And one
so,
of the,
yeah, go ahead.
I was just saying, one of the things that would come up too is saying about, like Vivian mentioned, the transparency, right? So the big thing was keeping this public, not behind a wall of where they have to sign in. The kids have to sign in to go do the work of their drive, but a parent or a tutor, anybody could see what the assignment was. So it was like, all right, did you do this? Show me. So then the kid could log into their platform, show the adult the work, but it allowed anybody to see what the work was without having to need the child's password to go check on the assignment. So they could have sort of this independent kind of mature conversation with, oh, hey, I was on the virtual classroom and I saw you had to do X, Y, and Z. Did you do it? The student say, oh, yes or no, or like, hey, show it to me. And it created a different dynamic than just like, what's your password? Let me log into your thing and let me see if you did it. It kind of made it more natural. And all clicking too, there was actually like the subtext to kind of how it's set up is, especially the elementary level, we want to get kids comfortable with switching between different platforms and sites and understanding that a new tab opens, just kind of like they know that they kind of have like one style in your classroom in terms of, raising a hand or Socratic, lecture style or whatever it may be. But that when they go out in the hallway, there's like a different expectation, or they have to then do something different to transition to a different space. This was like the digital version of that, getting kids used to the fact that not everything is going to be like, here's this thing with like 6 links. It was more like, you need to look, you need to figure out which link you need to click on, and you have to understand and recognize that it's going to open up something different, and kind of have that, like, get those like mental muscles going of like, I need to be able to navigate and transition in the digital space, just like I navigate and transition in the analog, the in-person space. And that's why there's sort of a lot going on there.
Yeah, and one thing that Chris mentioned that, really became a benefit as an afterthought, or like not something that I had in mind at the time, was that there are so many kids who have tutors or who were quarantined and had to be tutored. And at first there were so many demands and emails from people like, I'm tutoring this student, can you please tell me? Or, this student is being quarantined and needs to be tutored and needs the work every day, so can you please supply? And I was like, oh my God. But being able to just direct them to the site that had the homework up, and I can, show you that, and to the classroom, became truly just invaluable because, you know, I could just say, absolutely, please go take a look here, and, you know, you can see everything. So like you can see on the assignments tab here, if we go to the homework, oh, here we go. So, right, this was the homework for the week, right? So Monday, June 7th, these were all the assignments. Sometimes things were linked for students, sometimes they weren't, right? Tuesday, next group of assignments, and so on. And all I had to do was say to a tutor or say to a parent, like a parent would say, I don't, you know, my student doesn't know what the homework is. Absolutely, please go to the Google site, have your student access the site, and take a look at the homework for today. And like, you know, it kind of like put the ball back in their court instead of, you know, unfortunately sometimes, and, you know, it happens because everybody's busy, like people are just looking for answers from you, kind of end up also being a secretary and a step and fetch it. But instead, you can just say, do you know what? Absolutely, all that information is on the website. Please go. And, you know, at open house, I made sure that I spent time in the virtual classroom showing parents, showing students, and explaining, like, I work on this every day with your child. Every morning, your child has to access this. Every morning, your child needs to know, you know, where to find these things. And at the end of the day, when I show the students what the assignments are, I show them by accessing this page. So please feel comfortable and feel free to talk to your child. And if you can't find the homework, ask them to access it for you, because I've made pretty sure they know how to do that. So again, it gives you a little freedom to say, do you know what? I'm doing my job. You guys need to do your job.
And it makes those conversations, like you said, with parents, tutors, whatever, easier. When you get the same question, it's just, here's the link, go to it, it's all there. You know, here's the link, go to it, it's all there. It doesn't have to be a lot of time. So there's a lot more time spent building and sort of curating the content, and we'll make sure that everyone knows how to do that. But then that pays off on the back end when the responses to questions about, you know, assignments, curriculum, whatever it is just, here's the link, go to the link, go through, like, that's it. You save some sort of time on that. And it's one of those things too, where like, you don't necessarily know the time you're saving on the other side, because you don't necessarily get the emails that you might have if stuff wasn't right. Like, oh, I got 10 emails. It's like, right. But if it wasn't so transparent and so out there and so public, you might have gotten 20 or 30. You just don't know how many people are like really leaning on that. And, you know, we all got a couple of comments throughout the year, like, oh, that's so great. I just went to the website. I was going to email you, and then I remembered. So I went to the website. It was all right there. So I didn't email you. And we did get a bunch of those comments. So there was sort of those, like, you don't hear it or feel it all the time, that all that work is paying off, but it does pay off because it's public, because it's transparent, because it's out there. The work that the kids are doing is behind the username and the password in their drive or in their wherever. But just knowing that everyone can see what's happening just alleviates a lot of that question and a lot of that confusion that we have to deal with.
And it can also take a little bit of heat out of the conversation, right? Like, you know, it's like, it's wonderful to be able to say, you know, we do get emails with, my student didn't know what to do, or my child, you know, doesn't know what the homework is. And all you have to say is, no worries, this is where you find it. Just like I showed it in class today, right? Like, there's no argument there, right? Like, there's nothing else to say. So I did find it helpful in that way. So I think that was one thing we wanted to start with, like, by showing you. But I think the other thing, and Chris, you know, this kind of leads us back around, you know, when I started giving everybody a little bit of the backstory on how this class came about and what our thinking was and why we felt it was important to offer people. Like, I think it might be helpful for all of us to just take like 10 minutes right now, and you can share at the end if you want to, you don't have to, but just take a few minutes to think about how you use technology yourself this year, right? What went well, and what do you want to change, or what do you wish went differently? Because kind of having that information in your head and understanding like what it is that you want and you need to help yourself move forward will make it easier, certainly for us to help you, but then for you to kind of define exactly what it is you want to be able to take with you um, at the end of the course. Um, how does that sound to you, Chris?
Yeah. And then what we'll do is give everyone a couple of minutes, and to think about it, and then maybe open something up and get it ready to share. So because we'll all share the screens.
Yeah.
And then what we'll do is after we do that, we'll loop back around to some of the technical stuff. And like we'll show you like how to make those links, how to make blend the backgrounds with the things, and how to make objects link to different things. We'll do a little bit of that technical stuff, which will then lead to sort of the independent work between now and next week. So yeah, so like it's 4:42 right now. So let's say like at least 5 minutes for you to like think about some stuff, open up some tabs on your own machine, and kind of get ready to kind of show us stuff. And honestly, if you have stuff that failed epically, share that, because like that's the good stuff, right? Like the stuff that worked, and it's like fine, but it's like the stuff that failed is like, okay, why? And like what about it failed, or why did it, like where did it go wrong? And that ends up becoming more of the helpful stuff.
And
So
even if you don't have something to share, that's okay too. It's okay to say, I wanted to do this year and I couldn't figure it out. I couldn't get to it. That's okay too, because like maybe that becomes your goal for the class. This is something I'd really like to try. This is something I'd really like to put together. Um, and if you don't have a tab to open up, just jot down some ideas, just spend a little time thinking and maybe like making a list for yourself. So Chris, what do you think? Like
Lose
4:50?
like yeah, so like 7 minutes, so 4:50. So take a minute to think about it, go through your stuff, whatever. 4:50. We'll do some sharing.
All right. I'm gonna grab a drink. I'll be right back.
And while you guys are doing that, I'll just mention that it was in the email today, the link to that blog post, but I just tossed it in the chat too, just so everyone has it.
Chris, you guys can hear us now?
I can hear you. Yeah, we've been fine with you the whole time.
Okay, no, because I was reading on my iPad, but I switched over to my laptop because on the iPad it's able to share the screen.
Yeah, it's fine. It's all good. Yeah, the iPad can share the screen. It's just a little bit weird because you don't see the.
Yeah, it's tricky. Yeah, that's one of the things I discovered this year. Doing with the kids. If they're on a like a laptop or a desktop, it was fine. But the kids that were on the iPads only, it was tricky for them. So I figured rather than cause heartache for everybody else, I'll just switch over to my
Cool.
laptop.
No problem.
It is hot in Connecticut.
All right, so let's go. Who wants to go first? Who wants to show us
I
something?
can go first.
Go for
I
it,
can go
Allison.
first since I don't have my 2-year-old on my lap at this
There you go.
moment in time. I figure why
Go
not?
for it.
Could you just introduce yourself? Just
Oh
for-
yeah, so I'm Allison Ricard. I teach 4th grade at Heathcote. So I made a virtual classroom like maybe last June, and I never used it. Like I made 3 versions of it. I haven't looked at it in probably a year. And I also made a virtual classroom library, which again, I didn't really use. I made it, but I didn't use it. So I definitely want to revisit the things I made and update, take out, kind of revamp what I made and maybe look to see why I actually never really used it. There's probably a reason why I didn't introduce it to my kids in September. I had my 4th graders in June, like just play around with it and give me feedback, but I never actually like implemented it into my like everyday teaching. So I definitely want to spend some time like looking at and seeing what I can redo, update, and all that kind of stuff.
I think at first it really does have to be very intentional, right? Like
Right.
when I started doing it, like I made a point of having it up on the smart board every morning. And like before we got started, everybody had to be on the page, and like anything, right? For it to become a habit, you have to do it for a while every day. But I found that once kids got started doing that, like after just a few weeks, they were independent. So just a little tip there.
Yeah.
So let's see what you got. You gonna show us one of them?
Sure. I mean, I
Show us
haven't
one.
looked at it in a year, so I don't know how.
And that's fine. And that's part of
how good
this.
it
And
is.
that's fine. And we could talk off of that about like how you might tweak it or what.
So
you
no
might-
judgment. No
None.
judgment.
Judgment-free zone.
Ever.
Last edit was made June 10th, 2020. So there you go. Let me share my screen. So I started it and I made a schedule. These were the different slides, and see May 20, I put like a random date. I tried to do the clock where you could click the clock and go back to that screen. But again, I never used it. This was the book that they were reading at the time. I don't think I linked anything to it. So yeah, I started some,
And it looks good. And I think the technical things are easy. And that's what we'll make sure
but
we go over before we finish.
Reflex, I would probably put IXL maybe on here now. There are definitely things like I would definitely take off and update that you know what I mean? Like I haven't looked at this, like I said, since June.
Well, and like Vivian said, it also becomes a matter of working it into your day. Like it has to become ritual.
Right.
It has to become regular, because then that will shape your purpose and you'll realize what you don't need to add or what you don't need to build. It'll help you figure out what is really useful for the kids. And then it just becomes part of that planning process and then part of that daily meeting or whatever it may be.
And one thing that I didn't use this past school year that I've used in previous years was my blog. This was a link to my blog. I did not use it this year. The 4th grade used Google Sites. So I don't know, like looking at this now, maybe I would not put up daily assignments, because like on our sites, we had a page just for this is your homework. Do you know what I mean? So seeing what we did this past year, I might change my virtual classroom. You know what I mean? Just like looking back.
And that's the great thing about it, right? Is that it is kind of a living, breathing site where like you can reflect and look back and say, oh, this doesn't work, I'm taking this out, or what I really could have used this year is this, and add it in, right? So it can always be updated, it can always be changed, it can always, you make it work for you, right? Like,
Yes.
and what it is that you need at that time or at that moment, right? And it can change.
Right. So I'll definitely be looking at what I have here and tweaking, changing.
And from the baseline looking at it, you have the core components that like any user is going to need, right? You have the board,
Right.
visually it's like a classroom. The
Right.
board is consistent on every page, and you want that because you want to have like your audience, your user not be confused about where to go. Like you
Right.
said, the clock was going to be your little breadcrumb back. So then that's just a matter of training the students. And then that is always going to be in the top left. So the kids are going to then get very accustomed to just knowing how to use it. And what's good too about this is as you build these things and as you work with the kids on them, is you start to see how the kids see things, and you start
Right.
to see how they interpret what you build or how they're interacting with it. So like you may build it to look one way and you're like, it looks great. But then you see that the kids are fumbling through it or the kids don't get it. And then you're like, oh, because the kids are all assuming X, Y, or Z, but I built it as ABC, which is great because then you see how kids are really working or connecting with the content that you're building. And it helps to kind of then sort of foster that mutual understanding.
Yes. And another thing I want to do is make a virtual escape room. That's something I did not do that I want to do. So yeah, I'm definitely going to take a look at this, like,
And tweak
and
and
see
update.
why I didn't really use it or why I decided not to use it.
Perfect.
And then make it work for me for, September.
And one thing, that might be helpful, Allison, is start out by using it for just one thing.
Yes.
Add on to it, right? Like, so I'm going to use this every day just for our schedule for the day, right? And then add, like, if you want to use it for like your math assignments or like where the book club, where your kids are going to access their book club assignments, or I'm just throwing things out there.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great idea. I think I had so much on it.
Got a lot of,
and then I was like, what am I really using? What am I really going to use this for? And I think that's why I was like, I'm not going to really look at it right now. And I haven't looked at it, in a year.
Yeah. Great. Thank you, Allison.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
So anybody else have something they want to share or try?
I can share what I was thinking. As I was telling Chris, I don't have my computer, so I'm on my phone, so I won't be able to like project, like share anything. But I was making a list as Vivian, you were talking about your virtual classroom, and I also made a Bitmoji virtual classroom last year that I did use for like the first week or so of class, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is a lot to keep up. I think I'm going to make just like generic kind of like regular Google Slides. But I did use it and I enjoyed using it. But I think what I want to do now, since students are so accustomed to using Google Slides in general, is to just have like a very basic Google Slides where I put, and I just like made a list of all of these things that I would link, just like the textbook, the workbook, our syllabus, my email, office hours, Google Classroom page, all of those like everyday resources that, and maybe it's on a small like Google slide deck, right? But everything's linked, the curriculum. I even have a teacher website that I made, like a Google site that has a lot of like the curriculum, syllabus, all of that stuff as well. I would link like wordreference.com, just like a really good resource for Spanish, obviously Spanish teaching. So just things like that. And I think because like keeping up with a virtual and Bitmoji classroom is a lot when you have to consider linking everything and doing that regularly. I think that's why I kind of leaned off of using it so much, because it was so much to, to keep up. But I do want to keep one, as you mentioned, just like a one-stop shop, just like everything. If any of my students need to like find something, and just find it there, and just like make PDFs of the textbook, so there's never any excuse of like why they didn't do the homework, just things like that. But I do want to look back at the Bitmoji classroom that I started last time, and I think it was during the Google Slides course that you taught at one point. I think it was that one. And also just like update that and see if I can revamp it, maybe copy it and then change it a little bit. And yeah, so that's my goal.
That's a great idea, Marina. I'm sorry, Chris. But if you, like you said, you had like lessons and slides, you could always just link them right there in the classroom, right? So that the classroom never has to change. And it's just the link that changes all the time, right? So that's a way of making it useful. And because I had the same problem, that's why I jumped in. Like, I had the same problem. I was like, oh my gosh, I can't do this every day. Like, this is crazy. But then you realize,
yeah. Sometimes though, I'm afraid to share my link for students, because I always update my like presentations daily, and like I add to the same Google slide deck for like a week out, and I don't want them to like necessarily see that in advance. So that's why I hesitate to like share with them my presentation.
Sure.
And so that way I can like monitor what they're seeing, what they're not. But definitely, like, you have a point. Like I can always just link the presentation even after the unit's over. I'll have it there for
as a resource. Sure.
Yeah.
And she can hide view, right? She can.
So what you can, so what you could do is when you share, and this will be some of the technical stuff we cover in a few minutes, is when you share a link to a slideshow for kids, you don't really I don't ever recommend sharing the view link, because then they're going to see the whole thing, right? They're going to see with all the pieces. You always do the publish to web link, because then what that's going to do is it's going to be like how it looks embedded in a website, where you're just going to see it in present mode. You're not going to see all the other pieces. So it's just seeing what's in present mode. So when you give that link out, they don't see the slide sorter on the left. They don't see anything. So what you can do is in the slide deck, you build all your slides. On the slides you don't want them to see, you control click on it, you get a little menu, and one of the things is skip slide, which means that as they're going through it in present mode, it will skip over that slide, and that slide won't be viewable to anyone. It's there.
Is there a way to like control, like to skip all of them, like all like from slide like 90 to 100 or something?
Select them all. Just click on the first one, hold down shift, click on the last one. It'll then highlight all those slides. Control skip slides, and then what we'll do is I'll show you real quick since we're talking about it.
And then I have to remember to unhide them like once we go over them.
Yeah, and then what's cool too is like, and one of the things that we're going to show, and there's all this technical stuff, right? So you can take a million of these courses, and it's always going to change because things are going to be slightly different. Like one of the things with certain links is like, don't change it on the slide. You'd use the master, because then what happens is like if you put a link that's always there, then if you put it on the master, anytime you make a new slide, that link will automatically be added to every other slide. So you can kind of leverage some of these technical things that once you kind of know where they are, it makes things a little bit easier. So we'll do this real quick, just so we kind of freshen the minds and all that. Is I'll show you, let me get to this one. So like, I'm going to share. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a new Google Slides file, and I'm making it in this folder. Just as a slide aside, you always want to make something, when you're making something new, you want to be in the location in Drive before you make it, to ensure that it stays organized. If you're always hitting the new button when you're in My Drive, that's how you have like a million unorganized things. this is a shared folder. I've shared it with Vivian because we're teaching this class together. So that's why I get this notification. So that's also nice, is like you make a shared folder, let's say with a grade level colleague, then you don't have to share every item. It automatically takes those permissions. So like on this one, so let's just, oops. I'll just name this. All right, so the first thing would be, you know, let's say I'm just going to put a shape in here just so you can see it. Right, so there's this gray shape, right? So then what I can do is if I can just copy this, I'm just going to paste this slide a bunch of times. So let's say here, I'm going to make this smaller and I don't want them to see this particular one. I just control click and I skip the slide. Then what's going to happen is you're going to see that it's there because you own this, but when you go into present mode, you're not going to see this one. And then when you go to give the link out, you have to share it and make it public, or you got to make it, you know, visible. But you don't give the link. You would just come in here and you would just change this, let's say, to be Scarsdale Public Schools, Edgemont Public Schools, or anyone with the link. And then that means anyone can see it. So you still change it so that the file has those permissions. But then what you do is you go to File, Publish to the Web. Because when you do that and you get this link, these things don't matter. You can change that's only if they hit the play button. It's not if they just advance one at a time. And you publish it, you end up getting this link that if I take that link and I give it to somebody and you paste that link in, it's not going to show up as the actual presentation. It's not going to show up with, you know, the slide sorter on the left and the file edit view menu on the top. They're going to see it just as is. And then when you click through the slides, like I'm on slide 4, so you see, like I can go through and you don't see that slide where I made the second one. You don't see slide number 2 where I changed where that little box is. This skips down here in the bottom left. It goes from 1 to 3. So it actually skips. Like if someone's paying attention, they'll be able to see that it's skipped and they'll know that it's hidden. But you can do that so then you can actually have that visible, but it's not visible to the audience. It's visible to you, but not to your audience.
And what's great about that is, so you're truly only doing the work once. You know, the 2 minutes before class, you just share the view of those slides if you wanted, or hide others if that's what you need to do. But you're not doing the work all over again, which is the great part.
Yeah, that's definitely helpful.
And I just selected, I clicked on slide number 4, and then I shift clicked on slide number 6, and then shift clicking the first and the last, then selects everything in between. And then when you control click, you'll notice now it says skip slides, plural. So yeah, you can select a bunch, skip the slide. Now, in terms of links and doing things regularly, you don't necessarily want to come in here and say, all right, I want to make, and we'll do this quick thing. Like, let's say this is the clock, right? This is going to be our little breadcrumb. And I don't know, I'll make it blue. I want to make this link back to the first slide, let's say. So I insert a link. Now, I can have it link to different slides of this presentation. I can post an address. I could take a website ad, you know, I could have it linked to the NewYorkTimes.com if I wanted to, right? And then that's I mistyped it. The problem is, let's say NewYorkTimes.com, right? So there's that. So now you're like, oh, I want it on every slide. I got to remember to copy and paste it. You don't have to. What you would do is instead of building this here, I'll copy it just for time purposes, is you'll go to view. It used to be called master or slide master, and now it's called theme builder. But when you do that, what it does is it shows you what all the slides look like at a theme level, meaning anytime you make a new one, what you could do is if you wanted that little blue circle, that link to the New York Times, to always be in like the bottom right-hand corner, let's say, of every single slide you make, you could just come up to the theme, which is this top one, I'm going to paste it, but I'm going to move it over here. And I'm going to make it super tiny. Right? We'll just right like that. You could actually see right here where it actually has this little blue circle on all of them. What's great about that is once you do it, it saves automatically. So now we X this out. You can see that that little blue circle is now in the corner of every one of my slides. What's also awesome is if I just press the new slide button, I'm going to automatically get a new slide. That little button is going to be there because I did it on the master or in the theme. So that's a way, if you have regularly recurring links that you know are always going to be in the same location on the slide and they're never going to change, you can add them to the theme or the theme builder. What's also cool is when you're in this, I did it to this top one, so it added to every slide. You get comfortable with this. You could say, you know what? I'm not going to add it to every slide. I only want it to show up on, my 2-column slides. So then when you put it there, now if I go to make, you'll notice it didn't put it on all of them. This is just a title and 2-column slide. So now it's gone because I didn't do it. But if I added a title and 2 columns, now you see that it's there. So you can play around, and there is some of that building process in the beginning, but it'll save you time in the end because you can have things kind of preset that will always appear that you don't necessarily have to worry about every single time you do them. And you're doing that in the theme builder. And then that saves a little bit of time. And then making the slides whenever you want them, and then just selecting the ones you don't want shown to the audience, skipping them, that'll also save time. Cool.
Chris, I have a question just to go back to where you were saying when you share the link, you go to where it says publish to view. Is that the same? Because I remember, I think it was in your last class where you could like take out the end of the link to the last slash and just write present or just write copy, and it would do like a forced copy or a forced. Is that the same thing if you were to do just like slash present? Slash view, I think it's slash view.
It's a good question. I've never looked at, let me try that right now. I've never actually thought about it that way. I always do the
forced copy.
No, that forced copy is different. I always do the publish to web. Oh, it does actually. Look at that. It actually does. That's slick. Yeah. So what's
the same little hack.
Premise? Yeah. So it's a little hack. So what I'll do is let me catch everyone up on this. What we're just talking about is one of the fun hacks of Google is that, like, let's say I wanted you guys to all have this presentation, but I didn't want you guys to have this presentation. I want you to have a copy of it. What I can do is I copy this link, and all I did was I just went to share, copy the link. When I paste it in here, you'll notice up at the top at the very end, it says edit ? US people sharing. That will take whatever the sharing settings are on that file, whether it's view, comments, whatever. If you delete that and put the word copy, what happens is when you give that out, somebody's not going to see it. They're going to say, you have to make a copy, and it makes a copy of that file in their own drive. So they have the file, but not your actual original. And Marina was right. If you just actually change that word to present, oops, it will actually put that file straight into present mode. So yeah, slick. Nice catch on that. And present.
What happens if you write view? I'm curious to know, is view different than present?
Yes, view would be seeing it with the stuff on the side where you see this stuff.
Oh, okay.
That's where you don't want that, because then people would be like, why are those have eyeballs in them? Or like, you don't want your audience, your user, right? Your students, colleagues, parents, whatever. You don't really want them to see this view, because then they'll be distracted by all this other stuff. You always want to have them seeing it in present mode. Now, if you have a Google site and you add a slideshow to it, it automatically embeds it as present mode. So it's helpful, but you definitely want to leave it sort of in this view so that they're not seeing all that other nonsense off to the side. Because if you do view, they'll see that you've hidden things, and then they'll be able to click on it and be like, why'd you hide this? So you don't want to do that. You're hiding it from present mode. That's why you want to always give it out to them in present mode.
Great.
Cool.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. What else? Who else wants to give us a little peek into their past digital year? Shelby?
Yeah, I don't have anything exciting to share. I did take last summer we had a summer work day in my department. By the way, Shelby Marchese, I teach Spanish at Green Acres, grades 2 through 5. So anyway, my training last summer was on Bitmoji Classroom, but it was only touched on for maybe 30 minutes of our day. And so of course, I lost the motivation by the time I had all these hours to devote to creating my Amy Lepe, the Spanish teacher over at Quaker Ridge, spent 10 hours that weekend creating hers, which is amazing. But in this course, if we have that time to work, which it sounds like we will on our own or here, I do love it because I think it's so visually appealing compared to now what I used this past year for my first time ever is Google Classroom, which is fantastic. It organizes, it keeps everything organized. I do by topics. Everything's there, my assignments, my recap lessons. I do like a little snippet of what the kids missed if they happen to miss a lesson. But there's something about the virtual classroom, the Bitmoji classroom, that is just so visually appealing for the kids that I find it more motivating for them to actually log in and do the assignments or the work or the activities. And then the other piece of that, like you had mentioned too, is that when they're in Google Classroom, there's no way for the parents to check unless they go sit with the child. Show me where you are. Show me why didn't you do your homework? Let me see. And so I like that piece too. So yeah, I'm motivated to get going here on working on some stuff.
Awesome. And yeah, and like the Google Classroom is fine, but it's like, it's so linear, and it's there's even like, I feel like it's missing navigation buttons, right? There's no like back one step. You got to go all the way back to the beginning. And especially for younger kids, they're used to seeing the chart papers, or they're used to seeing the different centers in a classroom. So doing something like a virtual classroom with Google Slides like allows them to have sort of that innate, like, oh, I understand what I'm looking at thing. Whereas sometimes that linear, just like massively long list can kind of be overwhelming, especially for some of the younger kids. So cool. I'm psyched that you're psyched.
Yeah.
All right. Who's next? Adam.
I wonder if I should go before I get. I wonder if I should go before I get cut off again.
All good. Yeah, go for it.
So let me see. Let's see. Sorry. Actually, I need. Google Drive. Sorry, I was prepared before. Actually. So I tried to do this last year with my team because we're all on the same, and each one of us like had a door. And so if you click on the door, like if I click on mine, it takes you to my page. I mean, these are some of the different websites that I use. And then over here, I had useful information. And one thing that I took off that I'm going to put back on is a link. Every day they would come in and there would be a Google slide telling them what we're going to do, what our goal for the day was, the do now, and what the homework was. So if I present this, this is something that's also on my school wires page. So today, over through the summer, the kids can go and see all about me. So here's me and my dog with a mask and without a mask. And then a little bit about me, my family, what I like doing, some of my favorite things to do, some of my favorite food, music, books. And then, this is something that I really enjoy. And this is something for middle schoolers that I really like to focus on is before they say something, I want them to think about what they're saying. Is it true? Is it good? Is it useful? If it isn't those three things, then you probably shouldn't say it. And then they always have questions about their homework. How much homework are they going to get and what do they have to do? So this kind of takes them through what they're going to do. Most of my homework shouldn't take longer than 20 or 25 minutes. If it's taking longer than that, they should stop after 20 minutes, take a little bit of a break, go back and try it. And then after that, stop, because I don't want them up all night because they have other homework as well. Okay, and then what they're going to study this year: geography, the ancient world, classical civilizations, archaeology, some of the stuff, how they can be successful in my classroom, what do they need for school. And then I put this at the end because I hope they have a great summer and I'll see them in September. But like I said, one of the other links, it's not there right now, is going to be, like I said, each day when they come into the classroom, in the front of the room, there'll be a slide telling them what we're going to do for the day, what the goal is, etc. And let me see, how do I get out of stop share? Okay, so I'll stop sharing now. But yeah, I also tried to include like the special teachers, like the art, the health teachers, the foreign language teachers. Some of them did it, some of them didn't. Again, next year, since hopefully we're going to be back to normal, I'm going to, see them during the superintendent's conference days and share this with them so they can upload their own page so the kids can find, all the information for what they need for all of their subjects and specials and quarterlies. And the parents will be able to see this as well, so if they have questions, they'll know where to go. So I'm hoping that this will alleviate some of the anxiety, some of the nervous emails that we get, and it's kind of a work in progress.
And that's cool.
Really cool.
Yeah,
I was just going to say,
Good, no, go ahead.
It's just that like fifth graders, like from Heathcote, right, who come and are in Fountain, right away they'll know how to do all of those things, right? And that's what's nice, is like there's a little bit of vertical alignment there, just in that tech integration and understanding. Sorry, Chris, go ahead.
No, it's fine. And what I was going to say is you bring up a good point too about like kind of going back to, I think it was Marina was talking about all the links, or maybe it was Allison, but like you have like that, here's who I am in the summer. You can actually have multiple versions of these slideshows for different purposes. You don't have to feel like you have to wedge every single solitary thing into one epically long, massive slide deck. Because since you can link slide decks, or because you can embed these slide decks into a Google site, a teacher page, whatever, you might have just the About Me slide deck, which is like simple and clean. You make it once and you're done with it. That's like sits next to the virtual classroom. And then in the virtual classroom, there can be a link to the About Me one. So that's a way where you can actually like kind of simplify, figure out what are the things that aren't going to change all the time. Oh, like the Welcome to My Classroom. You know what? Maybe make that its own slide deck, because then you make it once and it's done. You could always link to it, but it's finished. You don't have to worry about it again. So it's like middle school or high school, maybe you do like the Welcome to My Classroom, and then you like each period, or sophomore, junior, senior, whatever, has its own deck. So again, you don't have to worry about certain kids not seeing other kids' materials, because one thing that's pretty cool is, and I'll share this real quick, with Google Slides. So this is the core, this is the slide deck that's on the website, right? And I've just been, we have things. One thing I can do is, so like slide 13, right? Slide 13 is blank right now. If I wanted to, I can copy this slide, and then I can take this slide over to here, this new one that I created, I can paste it. Now, when it pastes in, I get a couple of options over here. So I can match the style, meaning that it'll go sort of blank white. And if I match the style and I had, the blue dot on every slide, it would get the blue dot. Keep original is I just keep the original sort of page, right? Link and keep original is super helpful, because if I link and keep original, what that means is you get this little box up here in the top. Now this only goes one direction, but what it means is that if I come over here and I write like, welcome to a linked slide, I made it on this one. Now over here, I'm going to see an update button because it recognizes that the original of this slide has been updated. So then I just click update. And then on this new slide deck, you'll see that. So that can be helpful too, because if you have like one baseline slide that you use for all of your different classes or periods or subjects or whatever, and you want that one slide to be in all these different places, but you don't want to have to remember to update it 5 times. You don't have to. You build it once. Right? You copy and you paste it to all your other places. Then all you have to do in those other slides, and you'll know it tells you that there's an update. So you don't even have to remember that you didn't update it. It tells you, it says, do you want to update the slide? And then going back to Marina's point about like maybe the kids don't want to see stuff, you don't have to update the slide until you're ready. Then when you update it, a couple seconds later, you get that other bit there. So copying and pasting the slides from one presentation to the another is a helpful way to minimize some of that extra work of always having to remake the links, because you can have sort of your master set, select the ones you want, put them in other places, and then just update the master. And then all you got to do in all those other ones is just click an update button. You don't have to copy extra text. You don't have to do extra work.
And that's so cool. There's so many times when I'm like, oh, I wish it could do this. And then like, you know, if it's something that is helpful to people, like it usually can do it.
Yeah. And now the one caveat with that is it only goes in that one direction. So I can't change it on the place I pasted it to and have it go back the other way. And if I write on that second slide, but then I change things and I click update, it's going to basically go back and revert to whatever the master one was. So it really only goes in one direction, but it can be helpful. Like I said, especially like if it's like secondary, middle school, high school, where maybe you have, you know, 5 different periods of classes that are all like slightly different, but are share a lot of the same stuff. Make one master set of slides and then just copy and paste the ones you need into those individual sophomore, junior, senior, period 2, 3, 4, and then you can update quickly by going always back to that source file. Cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, no doubt. Who else?
Chris, do you think maybe we should kind of go through that that notebook just so that like people can get a sense of like what it is that we're planning and what maybe like samples are that they can look at when we're not together or they're doing the asynchronous work. Do you know what I mean?
Sure. You want to share that bad boy? I'll let you drive that bus.
Sure. Great driver.
You're from Connecticut. There's no good drivers in Connecticut.
Quiet.
It's like Jersey, but worse.
Oh, hey, there's nothing worse. All righty. So I just wanted to, right, everybody has access to this, of course. And if you go through, you'll see there are tabs on the side that you can use to access the different topics that we're going to cover, but right, it gives you the purpose of the class, the things that we plan to focus on. And Chris, I'm wondering, in the virtual classroom, right, here's a link to my classroom, but will you go through explaining how to build one from scratch?
Yeah, we'll do that in a minute once we get to the asynchronous assignment file.
Yep, absolutely. So we will talk about escape rooms. Here's a link to the escape room that I made. We did another thing we shared last time was a kind of building a choose your own adventure for students. There's a link there. Right, so this gives some information. We're Google Slides, building a virtual classroom in a Google Slides, some different project ideas. to share, and I'll even add to this because there are other things that I did this week. Chris will talk about the asynchronous stuff next, but hopefully the next time we get together, we'll move on to escape room stuff, and I'll have added, there are new things. I tried mazes this year, building a maze in Google Slides so that to get to the end of the maze, kids had to have the right answer all the way through. I used it for exponents as an activity, but there are lots of other things up there for you to take a look at. So I just wanted you to see that it was there, so that in between classes, like if you had a few minutes and you wanted to see what some other activities are, like you could have the opportunity to do that.
Cool. And what we'll do is I'll show you the asynchronous assignment page, and then I'll do a little technical review of how to actually start like a virtual classroom.
And it was also there in the slide written out in case somebody needed it or wanted it.
Yeah. So like now, as we move to like the next session, you have the asynchronous work. Is basically you're going to make a folder in your drive, call it STI 5602. That's the class. Two choices, right? You can create a slides file in there and call it virtual classroom, add a few links, add a few slides. If you have one already, like Allison's, like I have this one that you may want to use, no problem. Make a copy of that and put that copy into the STI folder. So that way you can have one that you can kind of mess around with for this class. The other benefit is you could look at that one you built previously and kind of put them side by side and be like, why did I make that choice? It gives you that sort of historical record of like, here's the one I did a year and a half ago. All right, let me make a copy. Let me make some adjustments and some tweaks. And then if you kind of like get overwhelmed or like lose your place, you can just sort of look back on that old one and go, all right, I know what I was going for. Or, oh, I know why I made this choice. And that's why the copy is really important. From the copy standpoint, what's really nice is you just file, make a copy, the entire presentation. When you do that, it actually tells you, it'll let you select the folder. So if this was living somewhere else and I had it open and I wanted to change that folder, I could actually just navigate around and put this somewhere else. So let's say I want to select that folder, I could select, it'll go into there. So that's a really easy way of like, you make that folder in Drive, you open up that old presentation, make a copy, you can, before you even press OK to make the copy, you could tell it where to go. Obviously, I'm not going to do this right now, but make a copy of it. Now, if you don't have one, that's fine too. So if, let's say this is my virtual classroom one, like let's say you want to make a virtual classroom, right? So I'll come down here. First thing would be the background, right? Like the classroom or something like that. Easiest way to do that is insert image and search the web. Now, the reason why is these images, for the most part, are going to be super high quality. And for the most part, they're also going to fit really well. So if I did, classroom background, you can actually get fairly decent images that'll work. Now, I'm not going to choose something like this, because if I put this in, as it creates, it looks good, but I can't manage these individual pieces. So I don't want to do that. I want to be able to like manage the things myself.
Yeah,
so
for the background, less is better.
Uh-huh.
Because then you can add anything you want.
Right. So I might take this one, because this one is basically just two walls and a floor and a little ceiling. So like, cool, I've got my classroom. That's my background. I don't have to mess with it. Now, again, if you think your virtual classroom is going to look identical on every page, you can add it as a background here. And then all you'd have to do is just sort of duplicate the slide. Will always be there. Or you could view the theme. And then for that theme, you can have that as your background image. you can also come over here and instead of inserting the image like that, let me get rid of that bad boy. What you can do is you can go to,
Duplicate slide.
no, slide change background and affect the same result. So the difference between these two is that when you do this and you choose the background, it's not a photo that's an object actually on your slide. It's going to be a background to the slide. Image search, classroom background. And I'll explain the benefit, the difference in a second, because it's subtle, but it's important. So now this is a background, right? So this image I can't move, I can't manipulate, I can't adjust. When I did it here, I did it just as a picture. So if I wanted to, I could make this a little bit bigger, a little bit smaller. If you do it as a background, by going to slide, change background, like I did here, you can't manipulate that image, it's fixed. In a lot of cases, that's going to be what you want. Other cases, you might not. If you wanted to put something next to your classroom, maybe you didn't want your classroom to fill the whole slide. So these are things you have to think about. So now I have, and I'll use a blank one, and I'll do the background again. So let's say I have this, right? And I could always add it to theme. And by doing that, you'll notice by clicking add to theme, it has now added that background to every single one of my slides. Again, adding it to the theme means you don't have to keep doing it yourself. So that saves, once you kind of have your baseline done, that helps save some time. So let's say I'm here and I want to put something on. This would be where you really go in for an image, and let's search the web and we'll do chalkboard. Oops, wrong button, sorry. Oops, like let's say I want this one. So I put this in. I'm going to take my corners and I'm going to, move it around. The reason why I take the corners is if you take these middle ones, it'll stretch it. It'll change the aspect ratio of it. So take the corners, it'll make it fixed in that size, so it won't look wonky. Now this has this whole extra bit of white space around it. So you can adjust it to make it fit. If you don't like the way it looks, if you double click on the picture, you get these little black sort of grippers that'll let you crop it. It doesn't actually change the aspect ratio of the picture. It just allows you to do that, press return. So then now I just have this blackboard. So now this blackboard is fixed. Now it's an image, I can move it around. So it's there. Can't make this part of the theme background, but you could, if you wanted to, again, if you knew that was always going to be the same spot, when you go and you do the view theme, just like we have this as the theme background, so it's on everything, you could add this to the theme, put it in that one spot, and then what's going to happen is now, no matter what slide I'm on, we're going to see it. So see, that one's back there. So you can do that. You can think about not working on the slide itself, but work on the theme. Downside to that is every single slide is going to look exactly the same. Meaning, like Vivian, if you look at her virtual classroom, you'll see like she has sort of like an entry point with a door and a list, and then other slides are classroom look. So not every single one of her slides is the same look. So you kind of play around with that, decide what's going to work for you. But then, like, let's say you want to put a link in, and let's say I'm going to go to, I like to work with shapes. And the reason why I like to work with shapes is every shape is a text box. You just have to start typing, flow of the day, right? First period. Then you want to make it, you want to change it so it's white. Fill color, change it to white. You want to make it black so it matches the blackboard, no problem, make it black. And then what you do is you take the text color and make that white, and it stands out. Now it's got that little border. Go to the pencil, you can make it black. There's that. To link things, just highlight it, insert, link. Now, again, you can decide that we're going to go to another presentation. You can go to the previous slide, so you can almost use it like a forward and back button if you wanted to. Slides in this presentation will let you go through and look at this. And you can say, oh, I want this particular thing to link to, I don't know, slide number 3. So what will happen in that is in present mode then, if someone were to click on it, it's going to go from here and it's going to jump to slide number 3. Now you would do the same thing for an object, like, the clock. So we're going to search the web, we're going to do a clock like Allison's. And let's say this clock is going to be the thing that's always going to be our breadcrumb back to wherever. And let's say I make it tiny. Let's say I'm going to always.
But you can put the kid's schedule, right?
Whatever you want. Yeah, the schedule, whatever thing you want it to be.
Yeah, the class periods for the day. They could click on the clock and they would see when first period ends, when second period begins.
That's what's nice is you can make these things. When you link them, you can link them to anything you want. So like, let's say I always wanted to link this to slide number 1. So that's always going to link to slide number 1. So I can copy this, and if I wanted it to be on every single slide, I just paste it on every single slide. Or again, if they're all going to look identical, you could go to the theme builder and put it up there, and then it'll automatically add it to every single slide, not just that you already have, but if you go to make a new slide, that clock is already there because I added the clock and the chalkboard to the theme, meaning it'll show up all the time. And then when you're in present mode, you click the clock, it's automatically going to take you back to slide number 1. You click it again, it's just taking you to the same place. It actually is reloading the slide. It's just back to the same place. So you can have these things linked to whatever you want them to. You can have them be as flexible as you want them to be. One thing to keep in mind as you're building this is everything is an object, right? So this is a rectangle in a blue box. Right, I put an image in of anything. Let's say I put this clock in. Oops. It's also in the blue box. Shapes, everything comes in these blue boxes, which means that they're all malleable in the same way. Meaning corners, take it down in the aspect ratio, middle stretches them. Different reasons, different purposes, depending on what you want. This little circle right here rotates things. Again, this does it for everything. So I could come over here to this, and if I wanted to rotate this flow of the day, I could. I don't know why I'd want to, but I can. Everything is flexible this way. When you're layering these objects, you'll notice that like right now I've got this box and then this clock goes on top of it. But now if I do another one, and I put it over here, that goes on top of the clock. The reason for that is Google Slides doesn't know how things need to relate. They only know the order in which they were added to the slide. That becomes the order that they sort of stack on top of each other. You can manipulate that though for any of these objects by going to arrange, order. You could send backward. So now it's behind the clock, but in front of the other rectangle. And if I just change this to like, let's say I change it to blue so you can see it. So you can see how it's like behind one, but not behind both. You could always order, send it all the way to the back. Now you can't even see it, but now it's behind both the clock and that kind of gray rectangle. So you can do that with anything, images, shapes, text boxes, doesn't matter in Google Slides because you're all in this. So that's how you can start like building like the layers of your rug, your plant, your thing. And you can then move them around and adjust them front or back of one another. The last little thing that will be interesting and helpful to you is, so I'm going to just delete my little blue box. I'm going to make this one so it stands out a little bit more. We'll do that. So I have this and I really like this, let's say. And let's say this is going to be something I'm going to use and I made it and it looks good. And I kind of like the vibe of how it looks. And I always want to use it. But every time I click on this, I move this away. No problem. I'm going to center this on this box. I get my little red line, nice and centered. What I can do is bring that down a little bit. So I'm using those red lines to make sure my two objects are centered on each other. I'm going to click and hold and drag it across. It actually selects both now. And you can arrange and group. So now when I click move one, it moves them both. So you can take objects that are separate from each other, like a square and a circle. And then you can either just drag across to select them both, or click on one, shift click on the other one, selects them both, arrange, group. Now what happens, they're no longer two objects, they're now one object, and you can actually resize them and change their look and feel as one set. So these are ways you can start layering those objects to create those classrooms, to add, the calendar on top of things. Last thing I'll show you then is, and then we'll sort of take questions and start to wrap up, is like if I insert an image, I search the web and let's do Harry Potter. And I find a picture of, let's say this, I want to use this one, like for a bookshelf, let's say. You could have this, let's say, in your virtual classroom library. And when you insert the link, you can have it go to, harrypotter.com. Or you can have it go to Raz Kids and Harry Potter. You can have it go wherever. So in that way, when somebody's looking at this page, they go, oh, I want to go read that book. They click on it. It's going to leave the presentation and then take them to that website. So that's how people will build bookshelves, where they'll basically get images of like a bookshelf, then put on images of individual books on that bookshelf, and then link those books to either a reading app that has them or to literally that, like a publisher's website about them. And that's how you can start layering these objects to create this, these virtual classrooms, and using things like inserting links on text as well as objects to make this piece, to make this slideshow interactive. With the big thing is when you go to view theme builder, anything you do on that will do it for every single slide automatically, which can be super helpful if you always want the same thing on every single slide. So that's kind of the down and dirty of how to do this. As part of that assignment, if you don't have one of these already, like 2-3 slides, play around with it, like figure it out, like try to start with that first slide, make it look how you think you'd want it to look, try to, replicate the vibe of your classroom, have a couple links to a couple different things, just to kind of get the feel and the flow of like how you need to build and how you need to orient different images and different objects with one another. Cool. Any questions about that technical stuff that I went through super, super fast?
Do you want to just talk about adding a Bitmoji in case anybody doesn't know how to add their person?
Yeah, I don't even know if I have one because I'm anti-Bitmoji. One, because I'm a curmudgeon. So if you are a Bitmoji user, let me share this, and you want to actually add your little person, you would just go to Bitmoji and Where's the login button? Oh, do they not have a login button anymore?
Log in with Google.
Is it there? Let me see. Well, I have the little extension right here. So if I just click on that, let's see. There we go. Log in. All right. So there's my guy, right? So fun. So now why can't I get, why is it not? One of the Bitmoji is one of those websites that's like more about the phone app than it is about the actual the website. Because you used to be able to just have it. You used to be able to just click on this and it would give you all of your people, right, Vivian?
Yeah,
Why is it not?
there you go.
Oh,
So
there
now,
it goes.
yeah. it just
So
needed a minute.
just need a minute. This is what happens when you're on DSL in rural Maine. So there's all these different guys in there. Once you create your person, there's also features, right? Like these are all the hellos. These are all the loving
And
things.
yeah, like so if you type in, right, like I want a standing Bitmoji or a sitting Bitmoji because I want my person in a chair or I want my person standing at the board, like, excuse me, sorry, like if you type in the kind of figure that you want, right, it'll give you those it'll give you those options, right? And so your Bitmoji could be different on each page if you wanted it to be.
Right. And you'll notice when you click on it, it actually says right click to copy it. So that like control click, copy image. I can then come back over here and I can then just paste and it will eventually. There we go. Pastes it in, right? So there's my guy and I can resize me and I can move him around, make him bigger.
Right. So like if you wanted him in a chair, the next thing you would have to do is search for an image of a chair that you can put your little person in.
And then we want to think about the right orientation of the chair, unless I want to sit sideways. Let's try this one. And then this is a prime example of I do this, and it's because I added the chair second. So this would be where I would come in here and I would arrange order. I would send not to back, because that'll go all the way back. I want to send backward. It's going to send it behind the last object that was added. So that's why it doesn't send this chair behind those other things, because those other things were added before it. It just sends it behind the last object that was added, which was my person. And then I can just move him up here and I can sit him down. One little quirk too with this is, look at that. It looks like I'm in a little teeny tiny chair. There we go.
I think it's awesome that your feet don't reach the floor.
Don't reach the floor.
Yeah.
Sometimes if you use your arrow key, the guy moves, any object moves, right? But sometimes it doesn't move or it moves too much. Hold down the shift key and do it, and then it'll move in fractional increments. And then that's how, by holding the shift key down and adjust with the arrow, that's how you can get more sort of finite moves to it. So, this whole Bitmoji extension right here is important. It goes back to what we talked about at the beginning, which was being signed into Chrome with the profile that is your like work one, because these extensions get tied to this profile. So that's why you want to make sure you're not having one window with multiple accounts signed in, because you want to make sure your Bitmoji extension is tied to that work account right there. Cool.
So for next week, then the thinking is everybody will just kind of work on a project, whether it's a new virtual classroom, the one you already have, or even just slides that you could use and paste in. If you access the notebook that we shared with you, you can kind of look through, see some different examples of things, just to kind of get you ready for our next class. Do you remember the date, Chris, off the top of your head?
22nd, I believe, is the next one. 22nd from 6:30 to 8:30.
Okay.
Does that sound right?
Sure.
Sure. Whatever. Of course, that's maybe right.
Yeah.
Yeah, the 22nd. And yeah, and like if you're making a new one and you've never done this, don't feel like you got to make a million slides. You can make like 1 or 2 slides to also play around with the sense of making links. You know, have an object linked to something on the second slide and then like out in the world somewhere, so you can kind of play around with how the linking works, and you can sort of see what that experience will be like for the kids if they're clicking through your virtual classroom. So even if you're not doing a crazy detailed classroom, try putting some things on, like link a picture to something, link a bit of text to something different, you know, playing around sort of with those little techniques, just to understand how you can build differently, and you're not just needing to build with like slide, text, but how you can make it a little bit more engaging. Cool.
Yeah.
Everyone good? Awesome. Well, go forth and create, and we'll see you next Thursday,
Thank you.
6:30 to 8:30
Bye.
p.m.
Thank you.
You.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a good week in a
You too.
week.